people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
News.
Okay, we'll start with this. A recent tweet from manager extraordinaire Adrian Clark, who said class is in session. An apparent meeting with two fighters that he manages, Brian Norman and former champion Errol Spence Jr.
He said class is in session. I wonder, what class? What is Brian gonna learn from Errol?
How to not live like a fighter, picking up bad habits in between fights that stifle your boxing career, how to flip a Ferrari, almost get yourself killed.
What is Brian gonna learn from Errol?
Put your biggest fight on the back burner when it's at a fever pitch to have several fights in the interim, smaller fights that don't even sell that much, don't make that much money, so that when you do have the big one, when you do have the big fight, you get dominated, you get blasted out of there. Is that what Brian is gonna learn from Errol?
That Adrian Clark thinks class is in session. These guys love to celebrate their own ignorance, their own mediocrity. I don't look at Spence versus Crawford as a success.
It's not.
In any way, shape, or form. For Errol Spence, for the PBC. So what could you learn from him?
If it was a success for anyone, it was a success for Terence Crawford, because he finally got the fight he was waiting for, and he lived up to expectations. He made the most money that he ever made. Then he made off like a bandit. He left the PBC after that to make even more money with Turkey LL Sheik. It was a success for Terence. It wasn't a success at all for Errol, for the PBC. Think about a fight that took about 4 to 5 years to make, just so that when you finally buckle down and make it, even though you didn't want to, you still don't sell 1 million pay-per-view buys.
5 years of build-up. It took you 5 years to make it. In the interim,
you sought out every conceivable alternative, everybody else that was out there. That's how bad you didn't want to make this one, so that when you finally make this one, and you've made people wait so long, it doesn't even crack 1 million buys.
class is in session?
These guys think they're so smart for what are their pitfalls. These guys really fancy themselves experts.
They want to be.
Anybody that advised Errol Spence Jr. to hold off on making that fight years ago in either 2018 or 2019, they're the reason he finds himself in this predicament now. See, if he would have had the fight then, perhaps when he was in better shape.
Because I don't make excuses for Errol about the car accident or him being damaged goods. You guys weren't making excuses for him when he beat Danny, and you guys think Danny's good. You guys weren't making excuses when he unified with Ugas, and you thought Ugas was good.
No, I don't make excuses, and I'm not entertaining yours. Like what we hear from Ryan. Oh, Ryan says the only good guy Terence beat was Errol Spence Jr., who was damaged goods. And that didn't stop you from picking him to win, did it?
If he was damaged goods, then why'd you pick him?
I want to hear that shit. Because no matter how you slice that argument, no matter how you slice it up, whether or not Errol Spence Jr. is or isn't damaged goods, you understand that if he would have had that fight sooner, if he would have had it then, in 2018 or 2019, before the car accident, this conversation doesn't even come into it. And yes, he would have still lost.
You don't get to say he was damaged goods in 2018 or 2019.
You see, it took him so long to make that fight. It took him so long, he put it off for so long. You saw why last year.
He knew he was gonna lose. He knew the whole time.
The virtue, however, for having done the fight in 2018 or 2019, as opposed to when they actually had it, is even if he still would have lost, and I do think he still would have lost, he would have had more time to recover. There would have been more names around that he didn't fight, that he could have fought afterwards to rebuild himself. That you could have fought Danny after Crawford beats you. And if you beat Danny after Crawford beats you, you know what people are going to say? People are going to say, yeah, he lost to Terence, but he still got it.
Still a good fighter.
You could have fought Danny after Terence beat you, Sean after Terence beat you, maybe Thurman after Terence beat you, then you move up.
And by then, you would have been all the way back. The way you guys did it, you exhausted every possible option you had avoiding Terence just to end up fighting him anyway. And when you did, you got destroyed.
And when you did, you didn't even sell 1 million pay-per-view buys for a fight that took 5 years to make. Class is in session?
You got a lot of nerve. Errol avoided a fight that he could have and should have had a long time ago, and he would have still lost, but he would have still been in a better position. Today, what position is he in today? He's a quasi-retired fighter. After one loss, he looks ready to pack it in.
After just one loss, that's the kind of fighter he is. What kind of fighter is that? Look at the picture. Look at Errol. Does Errol look like he's training for a comeback? Does he look anywhere near being ready for a fight? A fight with Sebastian Fundora at some point later on this year? We're in September now, folks.
No official announcement has been made. Errol doesn't look like he's in any kind of shape to fight. Hasn't announced a new trainer. To my knowledge, he hasn't hired one.
These are the people advising Brian Norman? Then it makes sense. He made the boneheaded decision that he made. It makes perfect sense when these are your advisors.
Putting off a loss you know you're going to have for the promise of tomorrow for fear, because you don't really believe in your boxing. Your team doesn't either.
Errol Spence Jr. strikes me as a cautionary tale. I mean, if you're going to learn anything from him, you learn from his mistakes.
You don't try to make them yourself.
And they were actually likening Errol Spence Jr. to
Robinson?
Sugar Ray Robinson, Sugar Ray Leonard. He's kaput. After one loss, he's done.
Ridiculous.
He's not of the same ilk as those fighters, but that's who you guys compared it to. You just don't want to own up to it now. That he was never as good as you made him out to be.
All you can do is make excuses about the car accident. Whose fault is that? Who got behind the wheel drunk?
Kind of fighter that he is. He ain't the kind of fighter that Robinson was. He ain't the kind of fighter that Leonard was.
You think I'm being hard on him?
No, I'm just being honest. I don't pour sugar on shit for anybody. None of these guys pay me to pull punches.
Pull punches on them, pull punches on you for being a casual, for being an idiot, for picking the guy to win so that all you could do afterwards is make excuses. No, I'm not going to let up or let off.
Because while all of that was going on, who was more vocal than Errol Spence Jr.'s obnoxious fans, arguing with everyone?
Class is in session? This is who Brian Norman is taking his cues from.
I don't think Brian can afford a Ferrari. I don't think he's making enough money yet to afford a car like that, but maybe he can flip a little Honda. Is this supposed to be a feel-good moment where he's getting advice from the old sage?
Errol is the wise old sage?
Is he supposed to be like Gandalf the Grey in your Frodo?
I don't remember Gandalf the Grey having an alcohol problem.
Crashing horses into the side of a mountain. I don't remember that part in the story.
Class is in session, though.
And you do have to wonder, looking at this, what exactly is Brian Norman Jr. learning? Upstairs at middleweight, reigning WBA middleweight champion Eryk Lara calls 160 pounds a whole different ballgame for Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia, who reigned as a champion at 140 and at 147. Danny Garcia, who's supposed to be one of these great names, one of these great guys that Errol Spence Jr. beat.
They're always trashing Terrence's resume in favor of Errol's.
Middleweight champion Eryk Lara, 41, boxing's oldest active world title holder, will face Danny Garcia in a co-feature of Canelo versus Edgar Berlanga this upcoming weekend, September 14th at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. The bout will be a compelling matchup.
That's one way to put it.
Between veteran fighters, also having implications for determining the world's top middleweight. Despite Garcia's entrance, Lara will be his first fight at 160 pounds. The division has recently seen a downturn. Title holder Carlos Adames has been inactive.
Whose fault is that?
And the future of unified champion Yanni Bekalam Kanalai remains uncertain. Lara, the division's other major title holder, can only continue beating Father Time but for so long. While Troy Isley, Amari Jones, Lester Martinez, and veteran Kyrone Davis are emerging talents, the division lacks the star power it once had with Gennady Golovkin, Miguel Cotto, and Canelo Alvarez.
That's the PBC's fault.
You don't think you're pushing it saying that? How is it the PBC's fault this division has died down?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Jermall Charlo WBC champion for a very long time, having not defended the belt in a very long time? He squatted on it, held it hostage without unifying it after a while, without defending it. What was it? 2 years?
The reason I blame the PBC, well, several years ago, Eddie Hearn made a play. He made an offer to bring that division a unification match between Jermall and Demetrius Andrade, then WBO champion. Jermall would have none of it. The PBC would have none of it.
Some time passes. Carlos Adames, yet another PBC fighter, becomes WBC interim champion. So they had both the interim champion and the full champion on their side of the street, and they never made the fight between them.
That would have been a decent fight. That would have helped to move things along. Now, Charlo's not full champion anymore. Carlos Adames is. He's got the WBC title. He's on their side of the street.
So is Lara.
But look at who they have Lara fighting. Look, instead of unifying titles between Lara and Carlos, they've got Lara fighting Danny, who hasn't fought in 2 years.
Danny Garcia, who's making his middleweight debut.
After 2 years on the couch, where Lara has been a bit more active in fighting, Lara believes his own experiences at middleweight give him the edge. All I can really say is, be ready. Lara said Tuesday at Tuesday's media workout, Danny Garcia was a great champion, but that was at a lower weight. 160 is a whole different ballgame. Garcia, a former unified junior welterweight champion and former welterweight champion, fought only once at junior middle before moving up to face Lara, with a 2-year hiatus in between. At 36, he could be one of the last fights of Danny's career as he seeks to add another achievement to his legacy. He better come ready, Lara said, because at 160, things are different.
I don't even know if I should look at this as a real fight because I don't trust the PBC. I wouldn't be at all surprised to hear that some of their fights are scripted and some of their outcomes are preordained, because everything about this fight, everything about it in terms of the fighters, their experiences, their physical dimensions, and their styles tells me that Eryk Lara should win. He should win this fight.
Lara is the somewhat taller, longer fighter with the longer levers, the longer extremities, I should say. He's got more reach, more wingspan than Danny. Characteristically, he's lighter on his feet than Danny. Danny, even in his prime, had heavy feet, slow feet, whereas Lara in his prime was light on his feet, moved around quite a bit. He doesn't move around as much now, but does he need to for Danny?
Danny was a decent-sized puncher at 140 pounds. Not so decent-sized a puncher at 147.
Didn't have the same power, the same concussive power at 147 or 154, even though he only fought there once. He fought Jose Benavidez, and Jose had been knocked out before. He got knocked out by Terrence. Danny couldn't put him away.
Danny's power above 140 isn't what it was, whereas Lara, in spite of being 41, he's sitting on his punches more and he's racking up knockouts.
Lara is coming off of his first successful defense of the WBA title against Australia's own Michael Zarafa, who he knocked out in 1 or 2 rounds. It didn't take long.
Whereas Danny's fight with Jose, the one I mentioned, that was 2 years ago.
Danny Garcia may have shown very good punch resistance at 140 and 147, but he's been largely untested at 154 and not tested at all at 160, where Lara does seem to be a strong puncher.
Still strong.
I guess what's compelling, what's intriguing, is that in Lara, you have a fighter who is so obviously past his prime, but then again, so is Danny.
So it's a question of who's in worse shape, who's further removed from their prime, Danny at 36 or Lara at 41?
That's what it's a question of, because a few years ago, Lara would have been the natural pick. Lara would have been the natural choice. Here and now, it's a little bit more compelling because he's 41. Though even at 41, he is a more active fighter than Danny.
That's where my skepticism comes in. The PBC has been trying to get Danny Garcia this fight for a little over a year now.
Why would you spend that amount of time on Danny Garcia and getting Danny Garcia a title shot? It's almost like you want to put a title in Danny Garcia's hands. Maybe it's because you view Danny, even at 36, as being more marketable than Lara at 41. Lara, who's a good boxer, but he's never been all that popular.
You ain't gonna make no money off that guy.
Thus, I don't trust it. I don't trust the situation. That everything about boxing tells me Lara should win. But this is a PBC show, and I don't look at PBC as real boxing. And what is a poor excuse for a co-main event, because it could have been and should have been a unification between Lara and Carlos Adames. Instead, we're getting Danny.
That's why I blame them for the middleweight division dying on a vine.
Even when they have the right bodies, they don't make the fights. And finally, in men's heavyweight news, the official price point for the Joshua versus Dubois fight later on this month has been announced. £20 in the UK, $20 in the US. across more than one platform.
It's going to be available on DAZN, obviously, DAZN worldwide. Here in America, it will also be distributed on pay-per-view.com. You might be familiar with that site, as they've distributed a lot of PBC pay-per-views.
In tandem with Showtime and in tandem with Amazon, now pay-per-view.com, a two-prong process, a two-prong approach towards trying to stimulate the boxing economy, the market, here in America.
Less exclusivity.
The pay-per-view is not exclusive to just one platform. It's not exclusive to DAZN. A two-prong approach.
That the pay-per-view is more affordable now. It's not going to run you $60, $70, $75, or $80. Just $20.
And you don't need a DAZN subscription to purchase the pay-per-view. The hierarchy being, if you lower the price point and make it more affordable to that many more people and distribute it across that many more platforms, you may get a bigger return.
I've seen a little bit of pushback that an Anthony Joshua fight is being billed as a pay-per-view in America. Some asking, since when has Anthony been a box office star in America? We understand in the UK and other parts of the world, but why here? Well, need I remind you that here in America, they built Ruiz versus Areola as a pay-per-view. Ruiz versus Ortiz. Ortiz versus Martin.
Those were pay-per-views. Zoo versus Fundora was a pay-per-view here in America, and those pay-per-views costed more than this one. So while I understand the inquiry, I understand the nature of the question, why is a Joshua fight being billed as a pay-per-view here in America when his core audience isn't even here in America?
We've seen worse.
They're making it easy for you to buy this thing. Easy for you to get to it. $20. If you ain't got $20, if that hurts you, and you'd rather take chances on some sketchy website and its pop-up ads and Trojan worms, you've got bigger problems than the price point of this pay-per-view.
Need to get a job.
Nobody should be complaining about a $20 price point. Nobody.
Nobody who claims to be a boxing fan. I don't want to hear it.
This is the opposite of what we've been seeing over the years. The fragmentation of the sport and exclusivity has not lended itself to the sport's appeal, that this fighter fights on this platform exclusively while that fighter fights on that one. That division.
So what are you going to need, 2 subscriptions?
The way they worked it out, you don't need to be subscribed to DAZN. You don't need to be subscribed to anyone to buy this pay-per-view.
Say it all the time. Boxing was at its biggest, and boxing was at its best when it was accessible to that many more people. Boxing belongs to the people. It's the common man's sport, the poor man's sport. So you shouldn't treat it like it's a luxury item.
For a long time now, that's what's been going on, tucked away behind premium cable networks and pay-per-views, essentially 2 paywalls.
This is a paywall, but it's not a very high one. $20.
For what is a quality fight, you can't pretend that it isn't. Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois, irrespective of whether or not you think they're going to be all-time greats, here today, they are 2 of the somebodies in today's heavyweight division. They are 2 guys that are making waves, that have names.
It's intriguing, and the general air of spontaneity that seems to exist in the heavyweight division, where anything can happen because everybody's one punch away from being knocked out.
When a guy's at that size, they ain't gotta hit you but so many times to hurt you, and they ain't gotta hit you but so many times to take you out.
So, while I'm settled on my prediction, I still have that understanding.
At heavyweight, almost anything can happen.